ನಿನ್ ಕೈ ತುಂಬಾ ಒದ್ದು ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ಲ. Good morning to all from Navik Agri Business Incubation Center, ICR Nivedi. I extend a warm welcome to all the participants who are eagerly waiting for this webinar. I find immense pleasure in introducing Chartered Accountant Mr. Karthik MV for this webinar. He is one of the renowned financial resource person who is present in Bangalore. He has worked for World Bank as a consultant and also as a consultant for several World Bank projects which were implemented by Government of Karnataka. He has several areas of experience in fine-tuning the financial aspect for the startup companies in and around Bangalore. And he is also the founder at Vishrant and Karthik. The presence of such personality for this webinar is a blessing for all of us. I hope all the startups will take the best out of this presentation. Now I welcome Mr. Karthik MV for this presentation and I request him to take it from this.
Thanks, Kaushik. You'll have to confirm if everybody's or if you're able to see the screen. Yeah. Thanks, Kaushik. So before I begin, I think I have to admit to all the audience here that I was a huge, if not huge, at least a very staunch critic of the whole startup when it started somewhere in 2011-12. Basically because of its modeling and the kind of the objectives that they were having. I mean, not focusing on the revenues and the profits, but only on the valuations. But now that has to a very large extent changed in the last 7-8 months, primarily because they have been very, very adaptive, very, very resilient. And the way that they have structured their businesses, I think hats off to their to their perseverance and their adaptability. Of course, along with the innovative technology that they've brought in and made a lot more contribution in making our lives very, very simple and connected. So with this, let me greet everybody a very good morning. The startup owners, the business decision makers, and everybody. I'm very keen to give you my thoughts on what I feel on the startups and its financial aspects in the next 40-50 minutes. So I would just like to have so I just wanted to give you a structure of this webinar. So the structure would be mainly on 40 minutes from my side on what I think is relevant for startups in terms of financial aspects, and then we'll be very I'll be very happy to take your questions on whatever that we have seen or heard in this webinar. So before I get into the structure, let me admit that when Kaushik gave me the topic, I said, okay, financial aspects are huge. I mean, everything that a startup does has to revolve around finance, because finance is a fulcrum around which the business works. So I thought of taking two very important and probably the most negligent aspects in the startup world, primarily because one, the ignorance that they have, and two, the seriousness or the priority that they don't assign. So let me, with this, take over on the structure and give you a glimpse of what we are going to cover in this seminar. Right. So, of course, before we start on what the financial aspects are, we have to have a glimpse of what is startup and what is the India scenario on the startups. And then I come to the two aspects that I'm going to cover in this webinar on the financial aspects. That is one, the financial performance measurement, and two, very, very important, highly relevant, highly neglected, is on the compliances. Basically, when I say compliances at the Companies Act level or the ROC level, the income tax, the GST, and the other local compliances and the legal compliances. Right? Of course, I mean, when we say about compliance, the general business promoter's answer is, what is that I get out of the compliance, right? Let me try to put some thought on that. Of course, I cannot give you a quantitative analysis of what is a cost benefit, but at least I'll give you some qualitative benefits that you will probably appreciate and take this on priority after this webinar. And then, of course, every business has challenges. Startups have more challenges because of the dynamism, the scaling challenges that they have, and also to some uncontrollable challenges like what we have seen in the current pandemic. And of course, talking about current pandemic and the way the startups have been resilient and adaptive is just hats off. I mean, I have never seen probably a bigger startup or a very sustainable startup which is filed for bankruptcy yet, right? I mean, we're very happy to see that startups have taken this as a challenge and started contributing in a positive way. Of course, to end this webinar, I'll be very happy to take questions from your side, and then probably try and answer or give my thoughts on what I feel on the questions that are asked. So, of course, before I begin on the compliance side, I have to give you a glimpse of the startups. And again, whenever I use the word on startups, it will be again from a financial perspective. And then I have, talking about that, there's a very beautiful diagram that I've got, got hold of. So this basically summarizes the entire journey of a startup from the ideation stage till the scalability stage, right? And if you look at this very closely, in all these three stages, that is scalable, transition, and becoming formalized, that is having a company or whatever, at all these three stages, there is an involvement of finance or compliance in all these three, right? So what is scalable? So scalable is I get an idea. I don't know whether it is workable. I don't know whether I can make revenue out of it, whether it is economically viable. So I try to do a lot of analysis, research, and everything on the product that I have got. So I start developing an idea, bringing it to a drawing board, see where what fitment it has, and then what is the market to the product fit that I have, and then whether it is repeatable and things like that.
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt. So your presentation is not visible, sir.
Is it not visible now?
No.
Okay. Is it visible now, Kaushik?
Yeah, perfect.
This one is visible. The diagram is visible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is
great.
visible.
Sorry about that, team. So I don't know why that happened. Anyway, so continuing on the startup. So at the transition stage, that is where I know whether this idea will be a reality or probably I'm too ahead of the market. Right? These things happen. I mean, when you're too ahead of the market, people don't recognize you that okay, you have something very, very valuable in your hands. So in that moment, probably you'll have to wait for some time, go back, wait for the time for the market to be ready, and then probably come again. And then if the product is really scalable, if the product is really acceptable in the market or deemed to be acceptable in the market, then I go to the execution stage, where this is where I start becoming more formalized, more reach is happening, and then I start to generate business or start to generate revenues out of it. So these three, in all these three areas, there will be a finance aspect at each level. Then I'll just brush through the Indian scenario. Of course, the Indian scenario has been fantastic for a startup. I think if you look at the current startup market in the world, I think India is the go-to market. Whether it's in terms of product, whether it's in terms of employability, I think startups in India have really cracked it. I mean, I was just amazed when I was talking to a friend in US. He said there is no technology like a UPI in US, right? And I'm sure this technology was made possible only because of a startup in India. Because of the market size, sheerly because of its market size and the kind of technology investment that you have made, I think it's hats off to those Paytm, the PhonePays, and the Beam guys for just doing that in Indian market. And of course, comparing on the salary aspect also, I think any day a good technical guy is worth more than what he's earning in Europe, in the Indian scenario. Of course, there are 18,000 plus companies recognized as startups by the department, which promotes the startups. And then heartening factors are coming now. So we have received $11 billion in 2019, and there's an estimate that we will be receiving standalone $21 billion in 2025, by 2025. Every year there will be an increase, and in 2025, we are estimating that there will be an inflow of $21 billion by the end of 2025. And this is probably what the government, the people currently are looking for. It is poised to create by 2025 again 5 lakh direct employments and 14 lakhs indirect employment, which is very, very important in the current pandemic scenario, right? And as you know, we are startups in India are basically now focusing on the fintech, the education sector, the Vedantus, the Baijus, and everybody, the health technology or the health tech, where I think Navik is trying its best to bring up, or sorry, that is an agri-tech, where Navik is trying to bring major technological companies into the agriculture sector and put technology in the hands of the people who are in agriculture. And of course, we have the Flipkarts, the Amazons in the e-commerce sectors. So I would now come to the fundamental aspect that we are covering in this webinar, which is basically on the financial performance or performance metrics. Of course, I start with a small, cartoon where they say, how do I measure the productivity? What is the tool? So the employee behind says, look at my bank statement. I mean, of course, it's in a comical way, but then it gives you a very important fact that if you're not able to measure something, then as they say, you cannot monitor. So you need a measurement yardstick, and in a business sector, it has to be a financial metric, because at the end of the day, I need to be profitable. At the end of the day, I need to create wealth for my investors. Otherwise, my relevance will be probably very downgraded. I'm not an NGO which is trying to help people from someone else's money, but I am a business which is trying to create value and create wealth for my investors. So that should be very, very primitive. The financial metrics should be focused on. And I have seen a lot of clients who do not give this at the ideation stage, nor at the product building stage, nor let's say at the at the stage where they're trying to bring out the revenues or start to bring their product to the market for sale. So before I give out specific financial metrics on the startups, when I say financial metrics, so I'm talking about ratios, like for example, the NP ratios, net profit ratio, the gross profit ratio, the debt equity ratio, which we had traditionally learned. As a finance man, I was being told that you have to look at the financial ratios and then analyze the balance sheet or the P&L. But in terms of startups, where I don't have some information, for example, I'm a startup which has still not done any revenue. So how do I measure? So my net profit ratio is meaningless because I've still not made any revenue. So what is the net profit ratio? Nothing. Even my gross profit ratio is nothing because I have not started any revenue, right? And similarly, your debt equity ratio. I mean, forget debt. I mean, I think you approach any banker for a debt, I think no one will fund you unless you become at least cash profitable, right? So you will not have much debt on your balance sheet at the ideation or pre-revenue stage. So how do I measure the performance that I have done from the beginning till now? So there should be some yardstick where I can measure it. That is where a very innovative metrics have come in both the operational level and at the profitable level, especially suited for the startup space. So the first metric is the cash burn and cash runway. I'm sure we would have read a lot of articles where they have used the word cash burns, right? Let me explain you with an example. By the way, cash burn and cash runway are interrelated. So coming back to the example, let's say I have started a startup. I have a product in my mind. I am in the process of designing that and putting the technology behind the idea. And I estimate that I would need a year to develop, test, put it to the market. Let's say I have started in September 2020. I would need, let's say, till August 31st of 2021 to have this product up, running, tested, sample verified, whatever, and then to bring out to the market for revenue. So till this period, I have to definitely incur a lot of cost. For example, I have to incur cost on my salary of my staff to develop the technology. I might need outside consultants. I might need, the rents to pay off my office space. I would have to pay out my utilities. Let's assume per month, right? I have to spend 10 rupees for sustaining and developing this product. And my viability or the revenue start is, let's say, for a year. So from September 2020 to August 2021, I would need 120 rupees. And let's assume that I've also got funding for 120 rupees already. This is what typically happens at a startup which has done its ideation and it is ready for building the product. So they would get some seed funding to develop the technology. So I've got this seed funding and he has given me, the investor has given me 120 rupees. So the cash burn typically means this 10 rupees that I have to spend each month, that I have to burn each month without anything in return in that same month. So basically cash burn is the cost that you have to pay each month without any return for that short period, that is till you get the revenue. That is the cash burn. So in this case, in this example, cash burn is rupees 10 per month. So with 120 rupees of investment that I have, I can easily maintain or sustain the entire product life cycle till it hits the market. So that is the cash burn that I'm talking about. Cash runway is basically, I have spent 10 rupees in September. I still have 110 rupees for the next 11 months. This 110 rupees is my runway. And to give you a very apt example in this case, many startups are now trying to extend the runway because of the pandemic. Classic example is an Oyo and an Uber or an Ola, where they've laid off people just to ensure that their cash runway or is a little made a little more extended, right? So that they can sustain and then try to become profitable whenever the market picks up. So this is on the cash burn and the cash runway. The second most important metric is the CAC, or the customer acquisition cost. I think, we have never studied this term at all when we were doing CA, which was probably around 8-9 years ago. And I'm sure not many would have even come in the current syllabus. This is a very, very unique concept which was made relevant in the startup world. So what do you mean by customer acquisition cost? The cost I have to incur to convert a lead that is a probable customer into my customer. The cost that I have to incur to generate and convert a lead into a customer. So what would be the cost? My marketing cost, like I have to put Facebook ads, I have to put ads on the digital media. I have to have my marketing people follow up with my leads, and I have to have people to create leads, right? These are the costs that goes into. So these are the paid costs. The other unpaid or the incurred cost is I give a lot of discounts. For example, when Uber was launched, they gave a lot of discounts to the customers. So that is the other hidden or incurred cost. The discount that they give to onboard the customer and make him use the product. This is the customer acquisition cost. Very, very important. Lower is your customer acquisition cost, better you are. And this customer acquisition cost depends on which sector you are. For example, if I have a business which is into food delivery or cloud kitchen, the customer acquisition cost can be a little higher, because once a person likes my food, then he will stay with me. Then I don't have to incur more cost by giving him discounts or anything. So in a restaurant space or a cloud kitchen space, a customer acquisition cost can be higher. But if you're, let's say, in a space which is very generic, which gives you a same kind of product for everybody, there's no differentiating factor. For example, let's say an Amazon Prime or a Netflix subscription, then your customer acquisition cost should be as minimal as possible, because there is not much of a differentiation and the repeatability of the customer using it is a little doubtful, right? And then the other metric is recurring revenue. The word says recurring, which means the customer is coming on board every time to use the product, which means you are trying to earn money and trying to earn revenue. And for that, you have to engage with the customer, and then probably it could be a monthly engagement or an annual engagement. For example, typically your subscription on the OTT platforms like Amazon Prime or Netflix, which gives you an option of onboarding for the first month and then charging you each month. So this is the recurring revenue. So is there a recurring revenue model that I have built in my product. So is that being monitored? Any metrics, if not monitored, is useless, because metric by itself will not be able to help anybody. Metrics gives you an indication, it is a milestone of where you are, but it cannot lead you to the destination, right? You have to make use of the metrics to arrive or to go ahead to reach your destination. So that's the basic fundamental or the basic principle of any metric or any measurement policy. Then I come to the profitability metrics, which is in the startup world again called a customer lifetime value metrics. What is this? This is basically, simply put, that what is the customer's profit that I'm going to earn over his lifetime use of my product or service. For example, again, I have used Uber or Ola. So can I predict how many times an Ola or how many times I will be using Ola or Uber, and then can I have a measurement to say, okay, this person Karthik can bring me X amount of profit. I'm talking about profit and not revenue. So when I talk about profit, so the customer lifetime value will be measured on the profit into the number of times he will be using it, right? And the next thing is, of course, your markup and gross margin, which is again a traditional way of looking at profitability metrics. So what is the amount that I can mark up on a product if the customer is very, very used to my product? For example, let's say a TikTok, right? I would say if TikTok was not banned, and if I would probably, if TikTok made it mandatory that I would be charging some kind of subscription fee apart from the advertising revenue, people would have still paid, because the value of a TikTok was so high at that moment, that people didn't mind paying some kind of fee for that. That is what I call about, I say when I talk about markup. And then, of course, this is a very fundamental and the most important ratio, the net profit ratio. Of course, it will not be measured for a company which is not into break even, which still has some kind of losses to be compensated. So this will not be relevant at this moment. What will be relevant for a company which is still making losses would be the operating profit, which is only whether it is able to break even. So whether the revenue that it is able to generate is able to meet its running cost or the fixed expenses. So when I talk about that, so I will be using operating profit ratio and not the net profit ratio. So this is on the key financial metrics that I had to discuss. I next come to a very, very important area. Of course, this is a little deviation from the financial aspect, but then being a finance man, being a practitioner, practicing professional in the finance field, I understand the importance of compliance. And I have said, if you read the tag of the header, it is an evil. I don't know, but it is a necessary evil if you consider it as an evil. It is a necessary evil, and take my words, compliances are here to stay. And in fact, it is going to get more and more worse and worse if you take it in that sense. So what are the compliances that we have? Of course, I think 90 to 95% of every startup will be registered in either two forms. One is a private limited company or as a limited liability partnership, which is again governed by the same authority, which is Registrar of Companies, right? So we have to comply with some of the rules under the LLP Act and under the Companies Act. I will have just bucketed under two major buckets. So one, which is the regular compliance that you have to do, which is basically your annual return filing, your the director KYC filing, your debt position statement filing, and things like that, right? Which is regular. So it has to happen within a deadline, and you have to submit some kind of documents to the concerned authority. It depends on whether you are a private limited company or a limited liability partnership. Then an event-based. What do you mean by event-based? Let's say I'm a startup. I have got a funding from some investor or a VC. So I have to intimate that this is a funding I have received from this person to the ROC by filing relevant forms like PAS3, MGT 14, whatever. Right? So I have to intimate based on the event that occurs. So in this case, the event is the receipt of the funds from an investor. So this is a complaint that we have to do. Then I come to a little more stringent provision that is on the taxation perspective. When I talk about taxation, it is basically of two, which is currently encompassing the entire taxation structure. One is the income tax. The second is the goods and services tax, or the GST. So what happens in an income tax? What are the complaints that we have to do in the income tax? First thing is the tax payout. When I say tax payout to the department or the income tax authority. And here I'm not talking about the income tax paid out of the profits. I am talking about the withholding tax or the TDS that we have to deduct from our consultant or from our vendor and pay to the department on a timely manner, right? This is a very, very important compliance. Please understand, I mean, I'll tell you again when I come to that slide. Please understand, the startups or the companies now are being rated by the departments based on their filing regularity, and they're being given grades like gold, silver, bronze. Even income tax has started doing that, and GST also has started doing that. So based on when you file, the periodicity of filing, the regularity in which you file, all depends on the all these matter for the rating given to you, and these ratings are there in the public domain. Of course, I don't know about the income tax made available so far. Income tax and GST is still not made, but yes, there is a definite possibility that this will happen once the pandemic reduces. Now that there is a lot of cash crunch, probably the government doesn't want to put more burden by doing all these soft, insisting on all these things. But then once this pandemic is over and once we get to the regularity of business, I think this will be the first thing that the income tax will do. So coming back to the tax payout, so I'm talking more on the tax TDS payout, so which has to happen on a monthly basis, and we have to file a quarterly filing, which is generally called the ETDS filing. And then the second important thing is the annual filings that we have to do, which is the income tax return, or ITR. And this year it is pushed to November 30. And before we file the ITR, we have to check whether we are applicable under any tax audit. So when I talk about tax audit, I'm talking about those companies or those startups or those businesses who have a turnover of more than 1 crore. I'm talking about turnover and not net profit, turnover or revenue of more than 1 crore in the previous year, right? Then we have to have a tax audit done by a chartered accountant. He has to give his report, and then we can file the ITR. Then this quarterly return is basically on these ETDS and TCS filing, as I told earlier. So you have to give the PAN number of the person or of your vendor, and then file it with the income tax saying that this is what I have deducted and paid to the government. And then the other person on his portal can see whether you have actually deposited that money or not. Of course, this is very, very important now that there is a lot of faceless assessment. There's a lot of talk about faceless assessment. No, nothing is visible. You don't have to go to the office to meet the officer and conduct the assessment. This has become very, very important because now assessments are driven not by officers but by systems, and artificial intelligence scans all your filings and your bank statement or the information given by the banker to the income tax authorities. It does all the screening and then shoots out notices for assessments. Very, very common. And this probably could become a huge area of concern when you have investment coming in a huge number and your allocation of share is valued at a very high price. For example, we had a case where we did a valuation of a 10 rupee share at 51,000 rupees, let's say 3-4 years ago. Right? At that time, we said, no, we cannot have this at 51,000. Obviously, for the simple reason that we have not generated any revenue. And just for the sake of retaining your control, we cannot give our, give some random numbers and then go out on the valuation. So we reduce it to a more sane number. But then when you have 51,000 valuation for a 10 rupee share, definitely the income tax will issue a notice for which you'll have to reply for the assessment. And in fact, in that case, we got an assessment notice also. And we had to give out instances, or we have to give a document saying that why we had valued at whatever reduced price that we did. And we had to close that assessment. So assessment again will happen. Of course, it will be faceless and a little more convenient in terms of complying and sending out documents. Next is on the goods and services tax. I would recommend let's not register let any startup not register under GST unless they have started seeing revenues. And if you are into a product based startup, then don't register till you hit a turnover of 30 lakhs for that year, because the threshold itself is around 40 lakhs. But if you see, okay, mine is a scalable business, so my revenue goes grows in terms of number of times and not percentage, then I would suggest I would suggest you to get registered under goods and services tax. The reason why I'm not saying don't register is because you have to file 2-3 returns each month, right? And it is probably not required at an ideation to technology building stage, because you have not started seeing any revenues, right? Again, so if you have started seeing revenues and if you feel that yes, my business is going to grow in terms of number of times and not in percentage, then I would suggest to go for a registration, which is very simple. Not more than 5 days of time would be required if the document submitted is fine. And then you have to do a periodical filing. If you don't have anything to report, you can even do it on an SMS by sending an SMS saying that it is nil. And then if you have some revenues and if you have collected revenues from taxes from your clients or your customers, then you'll have to pay the GST amount and then file the return. And if you don't file the return and if you have received the money, for all practical purposes, government assumes that you have received the money from your customer the moment you have made your invoice. So it doesn't think that, okay, you have raised the invoice, the credit period is 60 days, 90 days. No, the government thinks you've got the money immediately, and hence you have to pay your tax by next month of 20th. Sorry, next month's 20th, right? So whether you have received your money from the client or not is immaterial for the government. So, and if you don't remit that money within the 20th of the next month, then it is a criminal offense. So we'll have to be very, very careful when we raise an invoice and ensure that we get the money from the customer before the due filing date. Of course, we have audits and assessment. The first part of audits happened in 17-18. It is applicable for only those whose turnover is more than 5 crores for 18-19. And of course, based on the audits, you will get an assessment just like your income tax department. You will get a lot of assessments and you'll get a lot of notices. In fact, many of the companies that we serve have put a separate person to look into the emails that they receive from the departments. Right? So many emails come from the department these days, and so much of information is available with them. And with the practice now being followed, where the income tax records is being shared with the GST records and vice versa, the amount of data, the amount of information that the government has is immense, right? And it is very, very difficult for us to not be compliant, right? Gone are the days where we could have filed whatever that we thought of and then seen at the assessment. No. Now with the faces assessment, even talking to the assessing officer and probably the quoted striking a deal probably will be a thing of the past, right? And then based on the employee strength and the location that you have set up your office, there are other compliances like FEMA, I'll come to it later, the PT registration, the labor law compliances, that is basically the PPF, ESI and things like that. And then the local laws, which is basically the shops and establishment, the FSSAI, if you're into the restaurant or the food delivery space. So you'll have to comply with those laws. FEMA is applicable when you get any investment or any debt from an outside investor who is located outside India. So then you have to get the document from the bank, from your concerned bank, saying that I have received this money. You have to report to the ROC. After that, you have to report to the RBI and FEMA, saying that you have received this money and everything, right? So there's a valuation done on the shares issued and everything. So that itself is a separate activity, I think. So that's why I said financial aspect is huge for any company or any business, let alone startup. So that is why I've restricted my webinar today only on these two topics. So this is on the compliances. I had to include this because this is the most negligent. I'm repeating. I know I'm repeating this at the cost of repetition, but then many startups don't give it the value that they have to, because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you through this, right through in the slides. Before that, probably I'll just give you a small, a gist of what got a nice cartoon of. I have been here so long. There are two people who are in jail or who are trying to be, or who have been arrested. So they're discussing each other and saying that I have been here so long that I don't remember what I did, but it had to do something with non-compliance, right? Non-compliance is an offense which can make you get arrested, which can put you in jail. We are all aware why Vijay Mallya left. We are all aware how the Goel tried to leave the country, right? So non-compliance, not reporting, and I've seen personally that non-compliance can break a deal which was completely, almost at the completion stage, but then they did not comply on certain important statutory obligations, and then the deal was, did not get closed. So what are the benefits? The first and foremost benefits that you will get being a startup who is trying to get funding is you get a better valuation. If you have done all your compliances within the due date in the same manner that has been prescribed, take it from me, you will get a valuation which is at least 10% more than what you can command if you're not a non-compliant company. At least 10% more. And if you are in, let's say, a restaurant space, or let's say in a space which is more regulated, let's say like an insurance or something, if you have complied with all the legal compliances, then your valuation can go a little more higher, let's say 15 to 20%. This is a soft benefit of the compliance. And talking about valuation, it helps an investor in getting more funds. I don't have to tell you this. It gets an investor to get more funds, get better marketability of his product, and then strike a better deal with the investor or with the banks. The second thing is creates credibility in the market, right? These are days where the B2B customers are looking at your credibility. So they go to the MCA website, they go to the GST website, see who you are. What is your compliance status? Till when have you filed your returns? What is the last date of filing? Right? If your customer is a B2B or a business customer, then he does all these background checks. So it creates a lot of credibility for you. Again, it is a qualitative benefit and not a quantitative benefit. And then definitely in terms of giving you credit, if you have filed your ITR in time, if you have filed your GST in time, if you have filed your ROC returns in time, if you have completely registered under labor laws, the banker will be more eager to engage with you than a person who has not done any of the compliance process. He was ready to discuss because he understands the value of compliance, because it means that you have, you are being more transparent to the authorities and you are a genuine business owner, right? And then enhances relationship with regulators and government. This is a very, very important, and this is going to be the next trend, right? Government is trying to be more friendly to the people who are complying with the regulations, who are complying with the laws, than with the people who are not complying. So what they might do is give these ratings, as I told you, give these ratings and say this guy is a gold rated taxpayer, right? And this is made public to the public on their websites, right? And then what this does is you are accepted well in the market or in your or with the financial institutions, right? So this relationship, and for all we know, if you are completely complying with the regulations, the way an assessing officer talks to you, it completely changes. I have been witness to that. So if you are a regular taxpayer, if you are a regular compliant business owner, he gives you more respect. He treats you with more seriousness than, or less of a the kind of earlier harassment would be much less if you are a compliant business owner. And then when I comply, the corollary is I am transparent, or I am more transparent, right? Transparency is ensured. The moment you are more transparent, automatically you're putting a lot of information about your business on the public domain, which is well accepted and adds to the credibility in your business. Of course, when I talk about employee retention and engagement, what I'm trying to mean here is, let's say if you're more compliant in terms of all the legal or taxation aspects, then you will have your employees also treat you much fairer, because you will have less of an harassment from the government agencies. And when you face harassment, the first line of person who is facing that harassment is your employee. For example, the finance guy, or let's say your CEO or the CFO, whoever that is, right? So that if you're more transparent, if you're conveying your business results to the authorities more more frequently, more regularly, in more transparent manner, your engagement with your employees or subordinates become much more meaningful, and it tries to create a confidence about your company with the employees. Of course, we have challenges in all the sectors. Startups have huge challenges, and I have already said they have met those challenges with a lot of determination and courage. They have been resilient, they have been innovative, and they have been very, very adaptive. Of course, if I have to talk about challenges, the first and foremost challenges is financial information availability. When I mean what is financial information availability, we are not serious in maintaining our books of accounts correctly and regularly. We have seen startups who come to us to do the accounting 15 days before we have to file the returns. How are you measuring it? If you yourself don't know where the funds are coming, how are you investing it, where the expenses are happening? If you don't have a primary record of what is happening in your business, it becomes very difficult to implement whatever metrics that I have told you in the earlier slides. So the basic financial information should be there, should be regular, and should be correct and valid, right? You need to have a right competent source to maintain your books of account, to ensure that you get the right information for doing whatever metrics that I have discussed in the earlier slides. So this is one of the key challenges. Of course, startups do not have the money to give a competent person the salary that he demands in the market, but then you will have to probably try to outsource it to somebody, and then try to get the information available at all times or at periodicity. You need to get some kind of an MIS at a monthly basis at least. Looking at the bank statement will not help you at all. It might only show how much is the balance, where you are moving the funds, that's all. But where it is happening, how it is moving, where I was, let's say 6 months ago, where I was at least last month, those information is very, very critical. And then, of course, right business modeling and valuation. When I talk about valuation, the biggest mistake that many of the startups do in the urgency of getting money is they sacrifice their stakes, right? They value their business at a lesser cost just because the investor is coming on board and saying, I will invest 10 lakhs, give me 20% of your stakes. No, you should not be doing that. You have to be very strong. You have to build a right business model to say, this is what I have tested in the market. This is what is my revenue model. This is what is my profit model. And based on this is what will be my valuation. Very, very important. And this is what has sucked many business owners into the trap of the investors. So investors take control of the companies and the whole business idea is sacrificed. Never do that at any level of raising the funds. You have to be very, very prudent and then negotiate with your business investor. Then you need an expertise in advisory. When I say expertise in advisory, I'm saying about, I'm only talking about financial advisory, not about the technical or the technological advisory that I'm not aware of or I'm least competent in. So when I talk about advisory expertise, I'm talking about having the right person engage with you to decipher what the key metrics indicate to you, or decipher what the MISs are telling you. Because most of the times the CEOs or the CTOs or the COOs are completely tight bootstrapped or completely held up with their regular operational thing, that they don't give much information, much importance to the information that is available, and they're not able to interpret what that information means, right? And in these cases, you would need definitely an expertise to decipher what the numbers that have been presented to you and what you need to do as a corrective action. And of course, credit denial is very common in a startup field. You don't get access to banks. However, whatever the schemes that the government gives, banks or the financial institutions are not too comfortable giving a credit to a startup which is not made revenue or which is making losses. But slowly there is a shift towards giving credit to the banks. Giving credit to the startups with the banks or the financial institution. But then that means that you have to be compliant enough. You have to be regularly having a lot of compliances and doing all the filings that you have to do on a regular basis. That brings me to the last point, the compliance efficiency. To just give you an example, we have had a client who had to pay probably an astounding amount just to clear off his interest and late payment fee for GST. I had intimated him probably at the time that we started off a relationship with him. He didn't give that kind of importance. For whatever reasons, he was bootstrapped, so he wanted to use money for something else, or building the product, or he thought that was more priority, and then he did it. And then when he started to get some investment or some due diligence, then he found that there was a lot of compliance which were not done, because of which the deal broke off. Right? So then he understood the importance of compliance and the importance of timely filing. And then, that is what I wanted to tell you also through this slide, that, compliance is probably, you could say it is an evil, but then it is a necessary evil which is never going to go away. Right? With this, probably I stop. I'll be very happy to take some questions which come my way for the next 15-20 minutes. Thanks, Kaushik.
Yeah.
And I thank the audience for their active and patient listening so far.
Thank you, Karthik sir, for dedicating your precious time for this webinar out of your busy schedule. Now we have several questions asked in the chat section. I will go one by one.
Sure.
First is Swati Mukherjee. She is asking, we raise invoices as per customer requirements, and many a times payment is not done. What can be done about that, and especially with respect to GST? She is asking, sir.
Yeah, see, this is a very common problem, not only in the startup world. It is a common problem with even practitioners like us. I mean, we also raise invoices, but we don't get payments in time. But what you could do as a countermeasure is, you don't pay the GST or withhold the GST. I mean, I'm not saying this is the right way, because this is not the right way of complying with the law. But you can write a mail to them saying that if it's a B2B, let's say it's a business customer, he would need input tax credit that you would be paying to the government. So you can say, if you can incorporate in the agreement saying that if the GSTs are not paid to us in time, there might be a delay in creating the input tax credit, right, or passing off. But I would say, as a safe option, keep some kind of working capital available with you for paying off the GST, because GST law doesn't allow you to state that your customer has not paid you, hence you will not be paying to the government. No, the GST law doesn't allow you that. So it is more between you and the relationship with the customer, and it is more about getting into an agreement in the first place, saying that you will be paying the GST within 10 of days from the date of raising the invoice. Of course, it is going to be a challenge. I don't have a magic bullet for this, but it is more on the agreement side that you have to enter with the customer.
Yeah, I hope this doubt is clear. And second question, sir, Mr. Pushpak is asking, if I don't register for GST due to zero turnover, but supplier insists for GST number, what to do in this case?
Again, see, when you say supplier is asking for this, that means that you have started doing the revenue.
Yeah.
Or you're asking about the vendor registration, right? I mean, as far as I understand, vendor doesn't matter to him whether it is a B2B or a B2C for him, because it is for you to take the input tax credit. So for all practical purposes and for your requirements with the vendor, you can say we are not registered for the simple reason that we have not done any revenues.
Okay. So, and one more question from Ramya Srinivas. I think it's a general question. If we start the startup now, is it mandatory for GST in the beginning? And I wanted to start the agribusiness service that she's asking, sir.
Yeah. So again, as I told you, if you're starting a startup which probably you are not seeing generating any revenue in the next next 6 months or end of this financial year, you don't have to do a GST. Talking about agri-tech, if you are purely into agriculture, then you don't have a GST. But if you're talking about agri-tech where you're mixing technology with agriculture or related services, then you will be applicable for GST whenever you cross the threshold.
Okay. And one more question from Nelback Private Limited, and they're asking Rajiv from Nelback Private Limited, a farm automation device manufacturing company. We have GST. When we buy raw materials, we are getting input tax credit, but
Correct.
no sales yet.
But no.
And how this will be useful for us? Sales will take at least a year. Every month we do filing. This is what he is asking.
Sorry. I missed the last portion of the question.
How this will be useful to us? Sales will take at least a year. Every month we do filing.
Good. I mean, if you have registered, what you could do, you can accumulate the ITC or the input tax credit till the time that you have generated revenue, and then keep on offsetting the GST that you're supposed to pay against this input. So that benefit you will get. But then you don't, if you're not sure of, let's say your revenue is hitting, let's say 2-3 years down the line, I don't know whether it is worthwhile to have the credit for such a long period.
Okay.
It depends
I hope this is clear. And Puresh Daily, just a second. Puresh Daily Foods Private Limited is asking again. Our startup moved from proprietorship to private limited in the middle of the financial year. Our revenues till March 31st, taking both in account, was 20 lakhs. Need some advice on compliance. He's asking.
No, proprietor is different, private limited is different. So those two are different companies in the different persons in the eyes of law. So private limited, if it's not crossing the threshold of 20 lakhs, I would suggest don't have a GST registration. But if you feel that, as the previous person asked you question, if you want to avail the input tax credit, then go for registration, file your returns, take the input tax credit.
So we have a different question. Actually, it is about ITR. It's not about GST. We are an agri-tech company, so we applied for GST this financial year. Last financial year closing.
So we had proprietorship. So we wanted to know whether we have to file ITR for both or not. Number one. Number two, in the eyes of bank, whether it will give weightage when we have moved from proprietorship to bank, because together we have shown a revenue of 20 lakhs, but taking only just private limited, it will be a small amount.
10 lakhs, maybe 10 lakhs,
maybe 10 lakhs.
So can we self-declare it or not? Do we need to get an audit done, or we can self-declare because it is revenue is less than 1 CR yearly?
Yeah. So to answer the first question on the ITR, you have to file 2 ITRs. One for your proprietor PAN, which will be on your individual name. Yes. And second for the company's PAN, irrespective of whether you have generated revenues. If you have some losses or any expenses incurred, primarily to carry forward those losses, you have to file ITR, irrespective of whether you have earned revenue or not. So filing the ITR is mandatory. Second question, where you are saying that whether banks will merge this or consider this as together, you can definitely talk to the banker and say you can add an annexure or something in the project report or the financial saying that this was my together or a consolidated number that I have for the 2021 or 2019-20, and I am continuing the same business. Of course, the structure has changed. I have become more organized. When I'm saying more organized, a private limited company is definitely given credit or credibility by the banker than a proprietor, for the simple reason that you have to follow a lot of transparent procedures. You have to do a filing, you have to do the annual reporting and everything. Definitely there is an advantage or credibility in the eyes of the banker. So you can merge both the turnover. You can talk to the banker saying that I'm continuing the same business from 1920. Of course, I have changed the business structure. I have opened a new business entity, and hence I am filing an annexure. Going forward, I will have nothing on the proprietorship, but everything will be on my private limited. Definitely he'll accept if the financial proposal is very good enough.
And last question was, do we need to, can we self-declare? Because when we were in proprietorship, definitely the bookkeeping was not very organized. It was an Excel sheet, but all those entries had to be segregated, all those expense, purchase, etc. So can we do a tentative figure, or it will be auditable?
When you have a private limited company, you have to get the audit done under the Companies Act. So statutory audit is mandatory.
Proprietorship part, I'm talking
proprietorship part, you can still do whatever you were doing earlier.
Okay, so that books, that balance sheet of that part, can we self-declare?
You can, if it's not crossing the 1 crore slab,
Okay, thank you.
you can do that.
But for private limited, we have to get it done, whether it is crossing the threshold or not.
Yeah. So statutory audit is a mandatory requirement under the Companies Act. You don't have to do the tax audit, but you have to do the statutory audit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So one more general question from Ashwath. He is asking, what is advisable for a new startup? Partnership firm or private limited?
I would definitely not suggest a partnership firm. I would probably suggest an LLP if you're not looking at an investment from any outside investors. LLP gives a lot of credibility, again, because you're reporting your accounts and everything to the ROC. If you're looking at investment from outsider, from a VC or from any other person, I would definitely suggest you go for a private limited company, because it gives the investor a particular or a definite number of shares in the company or holding in the company, which probably will not be applicable, will not be probably that transparent as giving a share certificate in the case of an LLP. So it depends on whether you're going for an investment or not, the structure. But the partnership firm, I would definitely not recommend for a startup.
Okay. So Ravinandan is asking this question. Is there any mentors or firms that help to make ideas to implementation level and get started? Also help in all such financial aspects, technology, infrastructure, etc.
See, there are a lot of mentors. I mean, some of the VC who come on board also give you the mentoring part of it, right? On the financial side, I can speak of, but I'm not too sure on the technical and the technological aspect and how to hit the product on the market. I'm not too competent on that. But of course, on a financial structure or the financial aspect, we can definitely give advices. We are in a position to give advices, and then at the seed level stage or the initiation stage, you would not need much of an advice from our level. Probably we'll be engaging with you on interpreting where you are in terms of numbers and giving you a right path. But once you grow, of course, you will need a more engagement from the financial expert on where your revenues are coming from and how you have to channel your products, and then how you have to meet the statutory and the taxation requirements and everything. But at the ideation to the technology or the software development stage, I don't think you'll need a lot of advice from the financial expert.
Okay, and one more question from Pushpak sir. If I provide services to farmers directly related to his production on farmland, is GST applicable on this, or it is exempted?
What kind of service are you giving is important there.
Okay. Okay, fine, sir, fine. I hope everything is clear. And if anybody has any questions, kindly raise your hand option. We will let you in. Many in the chat section have thanked you, sir, for many financial acts, and with the simplicity you have explained, many are thanking you.
Oh, okay. I have not seen that. So,
okay, and many have asked your contact number as well as your email address, sir. You can just drop in chat box, sir. Your email.
1 second. I think it is there in. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, yeah, we can see, sir.
1 second.
Here your contact number is not there, no, sir? Contact number and email address.
1 second. I'll just open the last slide. Can you see the screen now? No.
Yeah, we can see the screen, sir.
So, can you see the last slide? Thank you slide.
Yeah. We can see.
Yeah. So this is my email ID and the contact number.
Yeah.
So I'd be very eager to hear more from the participants on these questions.
Yeah.
So Kaushik, if you can let me know any more questions, probably we can attend to that, and then.
Yeah, I think I'm just waiting, sir, to see if anybody has any questions. I think all the session is clear. I think nobody has any questions. Everybody is thanking for the wonderful presentation.
Can we have the contact number once again, please, from Mr.
I'm just putting in the chat box. Is that okay?
Okay, sir.
That would be better, sir. You can just put it in the chat section.
I'm just doing that. Kaushik, please confirm if you have seen that.
Yeah, yes, sir. I can see. Your email address is here. And yeah. Okay, perfect, sir. We have received your email address as well as contact number. And this is a general request from my side. If you have anything related to financial aspects, Karthik sir is a very right person, and you can contact him anytime. He will be definitely help you all out. And now it is time for the validatory function and just finishing of this webinar. And thank you, Karthik sir, for dedicating your precious time for this webinar out of your very busy schedule. And sincere appreciation from our side for the outstanding presentation you have made here. The slides gave the close look at what should be prioritized and necessary compliances that should not be ignored. And since all the startups are going through this particular pandemic phase and they're entering a new phase, your suggestions and experience will definitely help the startup to fine tune their journey. I believe all the startups will definitely take something out of this webinar. And thank you again. Thank you very much, sir, for giving your valuable time and sharing your precious experiences, sir.
Thank you, Kaushik. Thanks for this opportunity. Thank you, Navik, for giving me this wonderful opportunity of putting together what I had thought of and on this platform. I thank all the audience again for their patient and active listening. I'm very grateful for the questions also asked. So please let me know if I have if I can be of any help to you, and then probably we can connect on the phone or on the email that I have provided. Thanks a lot, Navik, once again. Thanks a lot, Kaushik.
Thank you very much, sir. Even Navik will be available anytime for all the startups to help in kind of financial activities and even funding opportunities. Even we do fund startups, and we have already provided funding for almost 9 startups worth 1.1 crore, and we are implementing several central government projects as well. All the startups can take the benefit of this, and even we do provide incubation space as well in the ICR Nivedi, Yelahanka, Bangalore. Startups can connect with us as well, and even Karthik sir is very right person for the financial aspects. You guys can contact him as well. We will definitely help you out. And thank you very much. Thank you for participating in this webinar. We will continue organizing the webinars in future as well. I will request everybody to take the benefit out of this. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Kaushik, once again.
Thank you all the participants.
Thanks all.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.